Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to our fireside chat featuring one of Vectra's global pharmaceutical customers, Sanofi. My name is Shri Sheth, and I'll be your moderator for today's event. This session is extremely special to us. It's not often one of your customers is in a position to share details of an attack in this level of detail. And so we're extremely grateful for the Sanofi team for being here. We hope you're as excited as we are. Before we begin, I wanted to cover some housekeeping items. The recording of this session will be shared with you after. If you have any questions during the session, you can type them into the Q&A chat box at the top right of your console, and we'll address as many as time permits. We've also listed a handful of resources we think you'll find helpful. You can find these resources at the bottom of the console. In the fireside chat, we'll briefly discuss what the Vectra NDR solution is. We'll then hand it over to our friends at Sanofi, who will share why they needed an NDR solution, walk through a cyber attack workflow from September 2020, and cover results of the Cognito platform and their future goals. With that, I'd like to introduce our speakers. First, I'd like to introduce Jean-Yves Pochtot, Group Head of Cybersecurity at Sanofi. Jean-Yves, would you like to say a few words about yourself?
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry for being invisible on your screen. I have a technical issue. So I am Jean-Yves, and I joined Sanofi in September 14 as a group head of cybersecurity. Since this time, I have been developing and leading the cybersecurity activity with a specific focus on operationalizing the role and developing our scope of accountability across the company, anticipating as much as possible the growth and the evolution of cyber risk. Sanofi is a big global pharma company. We have 100,000 employees around the world located in more than 100 countries. The company is dealing with 4 therapeutic areas: the specialty care, immunology, oncology, rare disease, general medicines, diabetes, cardiovascular, consumer healthcare, and finally, the most important for us today, vaccine, with a specific capability on influenza, and we are working very hard on COVID.
Wonderful, thank you. Next, we have Richard Webster, Head of Security Operations Center at Sanofi. Rich, would you like to say hello?
Sure. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Rich Webster. I've been working with Sanofi for many years in cybersecurity. We've been on about a 5-year journey to build a state-of-the-art security operations center. We came to Vectra probably in the middle of that process, at a kind of second stage of maturity where we needed the ability to look for a credentialed adversary. We have a philosophy of assume breach, that any company could get hurt, and we needed something on the network side to give us, the ability to actually detect a state-sponsored actor, somebody who knew what they were doing.
Thanks, Rich. Last but not least, we have Hitesh Sheth, CEO of Vectra, who will be moderating the conversation. I'll let all of you take it from here.
Thank you, and thanks very much, Shri, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Let me first start again by thanking our team partners at Sanofi, Jean-Yves and Rich. Thank you both very, very much for taking the time to do this session with a pretty large audience this morning. And before we get into the meat of the discussion here, probably a little bit of framing is useful as to, for those of you who are not entirely familiar with what Vectra does, and what role we play in the security architecture. We are a threat detection and response company, and we see the world through the lens of a zero trust network. And when we say zero trust networks, we really have, we think about like 3 core security principles that need to exist if you're going to build a zero trust network. First and foremost, you got to defend the endpoint. The second thing is you got to harden how you get to your data and applications, whether they're sitting in the cloud or the data center. And the third point, which is where Vectra plays a very significant role, is how do you detect and respond to advanced attacks as they make their way through whatever lines of defenses you put in place. I think as we all know by now that, and especially during the pandemic period and post-pandemic, we are all going to be in this hybrid scenario where, in essence, the workers have left the building, and they're accessing their data from anywhere, wherever it is they're working from. And the data could reside in the cloud. It could be in SaaS applications. It could be in private data centers. And the hard reality is exactly what Rich just said a minute ago, which is you got to have an assumption that being breached is a reality. And if that is the case, then you got to have the right mechanisms is in place inside the data center, in your cloud, and wherever you are utilizing SaaS to be able to detect and respond to advanced attacks. Next slide. And the way we accomplish this at Vectra is that we will collect data from the data center, from infrastructure as a service, from platform as a service, and from your SaaS applications. And we'll take the data, and then we apply machine learning and AI to go and look for the signal, curate that signal, and enable the Security Operations Center to respond at speed and with a great deal of efficiency. Now, the trick here, frankly, is that you got to be really purposeful about the kind of data you're collecting. And so we are very much use case driven, which allows us to build a very scalable platform and the ability for our enterprise customers to deploy our solutions, A, very rapidly, but B, to get the kind of results they want with the degree of speed and efficiency that they care about to respond to today's class of cyber attacks. Third slide. Which results in the following platform. So this is the platform that we have in the market today. And the platform has got really 4 core applications or products attached to it. First and foremost, we've got Cognito Detect for the network. And this transcends from infrastructure as a service in the cloud, whether it is AWS, whether it's Azure, and then eventually GCP as well, all the way into the private data center. And then right next to that, we've got the same behavioral analytics capability, but it's available for Office 365. Cognito Recall allows our advanced customers in the SOC to go and do threat hunting. We will take the customer's data, we'll store it, organize it, and deliver that as a SaaS service. And it's really very much focused on network metadata to start with, but it allows your tier 2 and tier 3 analysts to do advanced forensic hunting. That's what Recall does. And then finally, Stream lets customers who are building their own data lakes and they want to build their own analytics platform inside the company itself. Stream allows them to basically take the data that we would process, enrich it, that we would enrich for ourselves. We would deliver that to our customers so they can construct their own data lakes. And that brings us to the actual dialogue with Sanofi, which is what you're all waiting for. And probably a great place to start here is to touch on the COVID pandemic, where that has led us, and maybe if I could turn this over to Jean-Yves. Jean-Yves, your thoughts on this topic.
Yes, thank you. And what you were just saying is resonating to me very strongly. Indeed, this pandemic, globally speaking, this pandemic has been a call for an unprecedented mobilization for the entire health sector, including Sanofi, of course. At the beginning of this story, we have been helped. We were helped by our geographical footprint with a strong presence in China and in Asia, 2 regions bringing some early trends with regard to governmental response to the sanitary situation. And we took advantage of this presence in order to be reactive responses. As of February 2020, Sanofi reacted fast to prepare the company to a massive lockdown and a work from home organization with the goal of sustaining or even increasing our operational capability to support the pandemic fight. Indeed, in approximately 3 weeks, 80,000 of our employees were converted in work from home mode. It has been possible thanks to another anticipatory work, preparation of a massive cyber crash based on a scenario of no more access to internal digital resources. What does it mean for us? We raised up the following questions: how to structure the recovery operations, how to maintain a minimum level of activity if our network, if our infrastructures are down. These challenges have led to massive transformation almost finalized in February 2020. And this is what you were pointed out, Hitesh. The first, Zero Trust Network, allowing cyber to extend its bubble of protection and monitoring to remote devices, even when these devices are offloaded on internet. The second one, a significant cloud adoption with a direct connection to SaaS service, including Office 365. Those preparatory works successfully achieved in February allowed the company to make this transition seamless. At the same time, the cyber team led by Rich was dealing with a new adversary context. The floor is yours, Rich, in order to express what we face.
Sure. So, starting almost immediately as COVID began to spread, as we began to be desperate for information, the phishing attacks began, right? The level of, commodity level phishing attacks with lures, click here to get more information, that kind of thing. That ramped up very quickly, but it soon became much harder and much more serious as threat actors wanted more information or wanted to steal information, get into the pharmaceutical industry or into the healthcare industry in general. We saw a significant increase of threat intelligence coming in from our partners in law enforcement, from governments and intelligence agencies, from partners like Vectra, warning us. Lazarus Group and many others are focused on companies that are doing COVID-19 research. And I think all of us on the call, we've seen it in the news, right? Many small healthcare companies and organizations have been ransomed and hit. And it just ramped up to at the end of the year. I think we were hearing in the news that insurance companies weren't even providing ransomware coverage anymore because it was so bad.
Yeah.
So.
And yeah, thank you for that, Jean-Yves and Rich. That is really useful context. Next slide, please, Shri. Rich, if I could turn this over to you, and let's touch on a little bit for the audience on, talk about your environment. What does your global setup look like? You guys are a very large organization, 100,000 employees globally. You're in the midst of doing, critical groundbreaking work around COVID in particular. And it'd be great for the team to understand, the people to understand, what is your environment, number one? And then number two, what led to some of the, as you talk about second level of maturity, what led to your decisions to go and deploy an NDR solution like Vectra's Cognita?
Sure. So first of all, we're a massive global network. We're in every country in the world with, acceptance. We are a segmented network. We are a company that's divesting and acquiring new organizations and changing very rapidly. So what you would see if you were looking at our network from the perspective of a Vectra-like solution is an incredible array of protocols, new and old, communications to the internet, communications to business partners. So a very complicated environment. As I said in the introduction, we came to Vectra kind of at a second level of maturity. When we built the SOC, we had a lot of security capability to begin with, but it was kind of your standard industry antivirus, firewall, intrusion prevention, legacy intrusion prevention, signature-based. We basically went to the marketplace and looked for solutions knowing that we're going to be dealing with adversaries that are going to act rapidly to gather credentials and then go stealthy, right? They're not going to be attacking with a buffer overflow that you might be able to detect easily with legacy IPS. They're going to log on. They're going to use credentials and behave differently because they're abusing those credentials, but they're going to kind of go quiet. So that's what we were looking for when we went to the market at this point. We were worried about, how do we kind of put all that together? It was interesting that at the time we were looking at both EDR and NDR solutions. And of course, I think you need both. But when we got to the NDR part, we coincidentally were running a very aggressive red team process. And as you'll see as we get further into this presentation, in that red team, one of the things we noticed was that the red team, the system they were using to attack was pegged in the very top right-hand corner, which is showing in Vectra that we had 100% or 99% sense that the threat was that high, but also that we had a high level of confidence that what we were seeing was real. And that was very telling because at the same time, we had all the rest of our security controls in place looking at those same attacks, and they weren't seeing the attacks. So, complicated environment, but some really good ability to kind of put together what it's seeing over time.
Yeah. And I think, when I touched on the three principles, security principles of Zero Trust Network, in the time that we've been working together, your infrastructure has evolved and correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say today, you have a very sophisticated security operations, globally. Number two, you adhere to those principles. You've got a solution, as you pointed out, you have EDR that kind of gives you coverage on the endpoint. I know you have a SASE offering as well. And then finally, you've got us. So you've got the Zero Trust principles pretty well laid down. Is that a fair statement, Rich?
It is, but it's never enough. I guess is the thought that comes to mind. I think we're doing the right things, but we have to be sprinting and we have to be changing what we do all the time. So, yeah.
Yeah. But the thing, John Eves, please.
Yeah, I couldn't say better than Rich. I would like to point out that in our vision, even if I agree with you, the cybersecurity Operations Center is well equipped today, we are never at the right level in terms of usage because it's always a fight between attackers and defenders, and we can't sleep. We can't even slow down our maturity journey, and this is a momentum which is well needed by Rich without any stop, without any pause, because it's really what is challenging. With the Cybersecurity Operations Center, it's not a stack of technical capabilities, it's a combination of technical capabilities and appropriate usage. And here, your team, the Vectra team, is very well supportive, and we will see that later within our call.
Yeah, thank you, Jean-Yves, for that. And I think I could not agree more, because I think it is not unusual for some organizations to think that the answer to dealing with cyber attacks is just throwing more money at the problem. Ultimately, how you utilize the tools that you acquire, but most importantly, how you collaborate with your vendors and the people side of the equation is very, very critical. So I think that's an excellent point. And I think maybe this is probably a good segue to talk about the event that occurred in September. I won't say anything further. Rich, maybe I'll turn to you to walk us through what happened here. And educate us, teach us on what you did to deal with the attack that occurred in September of 2020.
Sure. So, as you can see, there's a timeline here. When you started that beginning, that recon, September 25th, we're really talking about an attack that's happening outside of our ability to monitor, to detect. What's happening here is we have an advanced adversary. We think the Lazarus Group, so North Korea, perhaps. Of course, attribution's hard. We can't be sure of that. But we have an actor who has gone on to LinkedIn, and they've done enough research to find an account that looks interesting that they're going to masquerade as. So it's a Booz Allen Hamilton account for a person who is a talent acquisition specialist. They create this new account. It's a real person, but there's now a masquerading new version. if you think to your own linked account, they probably didn't do much to validate that you are who you are. They didn't do much here. And soon our employees, and I can tell you, it wasn't just Sanofi, it was the whole pharma industry. We were getting, our employees were being phished in the messaging service of LinkedIn to look at a new job opportunity. The way we were phished is our employees were being suggested that there was an opportunity at Pfizer. So the employee gets this chat. The attacker on the other side spent the time to build a relationship, to build trust. They chatted back and forth over days. And that brings us to that weekend. During the weekend, at first, they used the app WhatsApp over the phone to exchange a little more information, and the attacker recommended that the person use the WhatsApp plugin for the web browser on their computer to download this job opportunity. So the employee over the weekend tried this. That what they're doing is they're downloading a weaponized Word document that when they got onto their desktop and tried to open, did not work. It didn't work for the attackers, and it didn't work, they weren't able to see the job opportunity. So they complained, and that kind of took us through the weekend until Monday, where the attackers provided an updated version of this Word document. So now there's a new copy on their desktop, and because they were using WhatsApp, the WhatsApp plugin allows for encryption between the endpoint and the web service. So they were able to bypass a whole section of our security controls. We do TLS intercept for web browsing. We look at the files you download. We apply content filtering, and antivirus, and sandboxing. In a normal download, we would have taken that Word document, put it in a sandbox, and seen what it does. But that web app, or WhatsApp, allowed them to get around that. So now they have this on their machine, and they open it up and execute it. At this point, Word, we think, prompted the user for permission to run a macro. They then the application connected to the internet and downloaded a pile of tools that, again, weren't hacking tools. It wasn't like they were bringing down stuff that your antivirus would detect. It was OpenSSL. It was AD Find. It was tools that are normal administrative tools that the hacker was going to need, but that aren't, viruses or things that are malicious. They're things that administrators use. From there, they began their attack. They began with AD Find. They began with scanning our network and doing recon. At this point, Vectra is picking this up. And, we haven't talked about this much yet, but Vectra is a kind of user behavior analytics. The Cognito tool is the detection part of the tool. And it's building a case. And if I look at the timeline again, Vectra has been in our environment for about a year now. So it's been building the case of what our normal users look like, how they're profiled, what their computers normally do, what services they usually use. And it's combining some logic around all of that to have an expectation of how we use our services, an expectation of how we use our computers, and an expectation of how our particular users behave and interact, and all of that within each other. So it's now seeing the AD Find commands. It's seeing this computer behaving in a different way. It's seeing the port scan. Now, our legacy snort-based intrusion prevention system is going to see a packet scan, or sorry, a port scan. It's going to alarm on that. But again, our network is big and complex. We have port scans showing up all the time because a new system is spun up, or a new service needs to be run out. So we get that kind of thing. But in the case of Vectra, I think the context is a little bit different, because it's not just a port scan. It's in some context of this user doesn't normally do a port scan. This system, this area doesn't normally do that. Following that, there was share enumeration. The attacker was looking for script files, PowerShell, Python, any kind of thing that might have a password on it. And from there, we noticed that they were I'm looking at my notes here. We noticed that they were at that point, they actually had a credential, and that's where we're getting in the middle here. They were actually able to find a password on a network share in that local area where they were, and they were able to get access to 2 servers that were on that system. We were able to see through Vectra the port scanning, the file enumeration, and then this oddity of how the account now had a new account was being used from that machine. New services were being used that weren't normally accessible or weren't normally used by this account. And there was a kind of a relationship between the account, the system it was being used on, and the services that were being used that just didn't make sense. And you'll see this in the next slide when we get there, that the port scan raises the confidence level and the threat level like any intrusion prevention system would. And we see, okay, yeah, there's something maybe suspicious going on. But it isn't really enough at that point to set off our alarms. But as the hacker continues their process and they get to the share enumeration, and then they start to actually log on to systems with credentials that they shouldn't have. We shouldn't see those credentials coming from that host. We shouldn't see those credentials coming onto that other system from that host. It's that user behavior change that all of a sudden spikes it up, and we know we have a serious attack. And at that point, a SOC analyst is coming, and we're able to cut the cord and get that machine off the system. I can share, too, that at the same time, our EDR did fire. At some point in that process, when the hacker moved to trying to use WMI, the EDR solution we had also fired. The way I look at this a lot of times is that I'm always asking my team that we need to build new detection nets all the time. We're constantly trying to find what else might they do, how could they live off the land, use the tools we have, use our accounts against us, how do we detect them? So we're adding layer after layer of detection nets, and I can tell you that only 2 of them really worked in this particular attack. And that's not enough as far as I'm concerned, but our EDR eventually fired, and our NDR fired because it saw this whole relationship. At that point, we were able to look at both of those solutions. And this is where the other part of Vectra kind of comes into play with recall, which is kind of a metadata. The way I look at it is it's looking at the packets going across the network, and it's parsing the packets and giving them to us in a translation so that it's easy to read what particular protocols are doing. So in this particular attack, we could go into recall and we could see, line by line exactly what the share enumeration was. We could see the file opens, the file reads, what the names of the files were. We could see the byte counts. We could see if there was a file transfer. And we could see this also to the internet. Is there exfiltration going on? So it gave us a lot of visibility to do the forensics. We used the EDR to cut the cord. We used firewall rules and proxy rules and other things to throw up a protection net once we had more data. We configured our DNS. We did lots of things to put protection in place. And then we began looking at it from the EDR part and from the recall part of Vectra to do our forensics. And at that point, we learned a lot. And we were able to take that information and build new detection capabilities and new nets to broaden our ability for, God forbid, this should happen again.
Yeah. That is incredibly helpful there, Rich. Super helpful, and a ton of learning out of that. As I listened to you at the very front end of the attack cycle, the notion that you had an encrypted connection back to your data center is an important data point, I think, because oftentimes I hear, and especially when you talk to folks in the board of large enterprise companies, and you talk to CFOs and other committees, the misconception is that encryption is the answer to a lot of things, when the reality is that encryption is also a friend for hackers, as it turned out to be in this case, right? So excellent. I think that is really useful. One question as it comes in, I'm just going to kind of weave in a couple of questions that are coming in from the audience. What role did the SIM play, if any, in all of this?
Oh, yeah. So the SIM played a small role, but an important one, right? So when Vectra fired, The SIM saw that, and immediately that's our process to inform our SOAR to send out a SOC analyst. So the SIM saw all of the events, so it brings the EDR and the NDR together. But in certain cases, like for instance that WMI call we saw from the EDR, that is atomic. That's enough for us to send a SOC analyst running. The same thing with Vectra. If Vectra sees enough activity and builds this case, and the confidence and the threat level are high enough, that triggers an alert into the SIM, and the SIM sends a SOC analyst through our SOAR process, our SOAR solution, our orchestration, just in case SOAR doesn't make sense, security orchestration and automation system.
Yeah, yeah. And you know what really impresses me about the Sanofi environment is that yes, there's always stuff that we all can do better, and every time there's a new attack, not just you learn, but we as a vendor to you, we learn quite a bit as well in the process. But you have a pretty comprehensive stack and defense in depth strategy here at Sanofi on security, from what I can tell.
Yeah, and a big part of that is an aggressive red team or purple team process. The idea, and this is where our relationship with you is different from what we have with other companies, and it's an important point I think we'll be making in this discussion. We desperately need our vendors to work closely with us. We need to have a close connection with the scientists in the back. Without that, it's just a blinky box, or it's just a technology. We're desperate for that extra touch, and we're getting that from Vectra, which is really good.
We appreciate that. Yeah, we appreciate that feedback. And I think maybe for the audience, Rich is going to share one more slide here that's going to get into a fair amount of specifics about actually what happened on the Vectra system. So if you go to the next slide there, Shri, that'd be great. And for everybody, this may seem a little bit blurry, but I think there are some important points here that Rich would like to share. So Rich, please, to you.
Sure. So again, it is blurry. On the left side at the bottom, you can see we have a port sweep. Again, legacy IPS is going to see that, but in this case, it's in a context that's a little bit different because it's coming from a regular user's laptop. It's a little bit unusual, or a little bit more unusual. The next thing is the file share enumeration. Again, it's in a context of coming from a strange user, from a strange system that shouldn't be doing this kind of thing, and it's building the case. And then finally, the privilege escalation. So, again, Cognito, from my perspective, is doing a kind of user behavior, but also a computer behavior, but also a service behavior and a privilege monitoring solution. It's looking to see if somebody's account is all of a sudden acting like it has more privileges than it should, or if a computer all of a sudden is acting as a administrative jump box, that kind of a thing. And so what you can see in the graph up the top is that graph is tracking the threat level and the certainty level of the threat. And understand, we spend a lot of time working with the solution, with every solution, trying to get the most value out of it, trying to tune it properly. But you can see here, it jumped up, and then it jumped up again till we were at 99% threat level and a 78% certainty. So very strong on the certainty, but very, very strong on the threat level. And that's enough for us to know, we're in trouble and we need to act. And this other little picture on the right that's a little bit clearer is kind of putting that relationship that I was trying to describe, that's different, very different from a normal intrusion prevention system that might be looking for a particular string pattern in a packet. What it's looking at here is it's built some profiles around how a host behaves. It has a profile around how an account behaves, and also how we use our services. And that triad is basically something it's monitoring in relationship, one of those things to the other, and also the level of privilege on top of that. So all around those three things together, create a scenario where Vectra can say, this looks like you're in danger. I hope to God not to see this go off, but I'm glad it was there, and I think it's a solution or a part of the answer to what we do with stealthy attackers, because we know day for day they're going to get more mature, or day by day they're going to get more mature, they're going to get smarter. We're different than anything else in IT, right? Because we're dealing with adversaries, and they're smart, well-educated people. They know everything we have in our toolbox. So we have to watch and try to see every which way how they may attack us.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for that. And there's a bunch of questions that are coming in that I'm going to save for a little bit towards the end. But if you can, Shri, if you go to the next slide, it'd be useful for us to describe, because I think, you made this point, Rich, and Jean-Yves, you did it as well, as to what collaboration should look like. It'd be great for us to kind of just discuss with the audience here, what is the relationship like between Sanofi and Vectra? And I think, Rich, you and I had started talking, early on in the engagement with Sanofi. And then Jean-Yves, you and I met in Paris, and about what it feels like almost 18 months ago, 2 years ago. But, rather than, if I could turn this over to you, maybe Jean-Yves first, your thoughts on the relationship between both our organizations.
Yeah, thank you, Hitesh. You can't see me. I'm sorry again for that, but I am smiling. I am smiling because indeed I do remember our first meeting in Paris. It was in summer 2019, in the frame of our vendor selection process. And I do remember exactly that we were not discussing about the product relevancy or the product performance. Instead, we were only focused, you and me, Hitesh, on how our companies would partner along the contract. And that makes a lot of sense for me, because our cyber team, for our cyber team, a cyber solution, must comply with three main requirements. The first, the solution must be among the best for the purpose. Cyber risk, they deserve best-in-class capabilities. Second, this solution must remain the best-in-class for a long time. I do allocate my resources, they are rare, in priority to gain and to get the value of the capability, instead of replacing the solution every year or every 2 years. And the long-term promise is for me key. The third and the last point, we want to be considered as a partner by our vendors. You, Vectra, you are bringing your innovation, your disruptive technical value, when Sanofi, my team, the Cybersecurity Operations Center team, is bringing the solution usage feedback. And the combination is the path of the progress, is the path of the maturity. And already mentioned by Rich, I want to emphasize at that point, Vectra is for Sanofi one of our most exemplary vendors. It's not because I am here to speak to testimony around Vectra that I am saying that. It is because, Hitesh, you are bringing to your team a specific mindset. You are focusing on co-building, partnership mindset, and that is reflected by your team. Rich was mentioning that you have been always with us doing our red, our purple team operations, and that is true. You pick up any lesson learned. Your team is back to your office to learn and to progress and to improve, and that is very interesting. We have many vendors. All of them are very valuable for you, but where are those which dedicate such level of partnership?
Jean-Yves, that is incredibly kind of you, very kind of you. And I have to tell you that we are a smarter company. We a result of this collaboration and partnership with the team, Rich, and everybody at Sanofi, we become better. We end up producing a better product as a result and make the improvements that are necessary to deal with the ever-changing landscape of new attacks. So this is a two-way street for us, very, very much so. And we could not do what we do without the kind of support we get from your organization as well. So that is incredible. We are very grateful for the comments nonetheless. Very, very grateful. Rich, any thoughts on your end, because we are on the ground with you, as Jean-Yves said, and we are. I feel like we are in the trenches, and we're effectively really just part of your team, really, for intents and purposes.
Yeah, and I think that's that makes all the difference. I don't know how I can expect that from all of our vendors, but cybersecurity, like I said before, is different than other things in IT. We can't just buy the box or buy the technology and use it. The attackers are changing their techniques too fast. The threats are too serious. There's an adversary. So we need to have this kind of relationship, and almost never do. So from my perspective, it's been great. I know you guys have helped us with recall. We had an issue with some DDoS in the summer, and being able to analyze that DNS traffic with recall was really helpful. And one of the other things that might be interesting for folks on the call is, being a big organization, we have some issues with legacy protocols, and we've been able to leverage recall to kind of look at that, understand how we're using them, where we're using them, or, oh my God, we're still using them. We got to make these go away. Very serious issue for us, not an attack, but a vulnerability.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm going to weave in a couple of specific questions here just to make sure we can respond back to the audience. So one of the questions that came in was, are you going to remove local admin accounts, given what just occurred?
Yeah, we actually have done that already. This said local admin, but what it really meant wasn't, in quotes, a local admin account. It was an administrative account that was in a script that had no business being on a share. It was, craziness. It shouldn't have been there, but it's not there anymore. So yeah, we use very strong controls around local admin account. Every password is controlled by Active Directory. They're all different globally. You have to go into the system to get the password, and it changes automatically back again. So yeah, that's an important one.
Okay. Yeah. Please.
Because I would like to add something. In a large company like Sanofi, nothing is perfect. And it's very important for us, cybersecurity, to clearly realize that we are running in a non-fully managed context. The company is so large. The speed of acquisition, divestiture is so fast that it's a perpetual battle to apply the basic principles. And we are compensating our technology, our process, our architecture weaknesses by best-in-class detection and response. Of course, most of our participants could say, so the basic, the most important is to come back to the basic. Yes, I agree, but the remaining amount of tasks is incredibly huge, and this is why the Security Operations Center is a cornerstone of our cyber capabilities, and we do take care to provide to this team the best-in-class detection and response analysis capability.
Yeah. Thank you, Jean-Yves. Maybe I think based on what you just said, maybe if you can go to the next slide, Shri, and invite either yourself, Jean-Yves, or Rich to talk about how do you see Vectra helping Sanofi's cybersecurity and risk reduction programs, initiatives, into the future. And then maybe I think just for the audience, and so it's not just about NDR or Vectra, just broadly speaking, right? If you start with NDR, talk about any thoughts you have on how your security posture is going to evolve from here.
Okay. Maybe I'll
start.
Rich,
yeah.
Just to be short, I envision the next step indeed. We started with a first layer of detection and response endpoint. We reach out a second level of maturity with the NDR, and the next step, which can maybe be supported by Vectra, is all around behavioral around identity accounts. Because in a zero trust network, everything is based on three pillars: network, endpoint, identity. And today, we are not at the right level for identity, even if our identities are well managed, but gain some capability from the Active Directory is still a challenge for many companies, including us.
Okay. Thank you. Rich?
Yeah, I guess, I might start by talking a little bit about our very rapid move into the cloud. For us, again, we're big and complex. So that means Microsoft, that means Google, that means Amazon, that means Tencent in China. All of those environments are proprietary. We're moving very rapidly out of the enterprise. So as we build our detection nets, as I described earlier, layer after layer in the enterprise, it gets very mature. We're leaving the enterprise. So that's a big part of what I'm worried about. I think what will drive us, again, is this continued red adversarial training process that we attack, we try to evade and defeat ourselves. We have to do that again and again, and that's a place where I hope we can continue to work with Vectra very closely. In doing that, I think we will evade Vectra. I think on your own website you show some advice on how to defeat machine learning and how to defeat your own detection technologies. We know the adversary is going to try to do that. And might. Again, our environment's very complex. One of the things I had hoped in this attack was that we would have detected the C2, and we didn't. And part of that's because of the complexity of the way our proxies are, that they're actually on the internet in the cloud. And so the connection to the proxy is an external connection. But from our perspective, it's not it's not an internal connection from an internal proxy to the outside. So the C2 looks weird if it's going through our own proxy system. So there's a lot of things we have to deal with as we move to the cloud. The other thing is that we're working with you guys right now on this idea of detection profiles, where we're taking subsets of things that might false alarm a little bit, putting them into subsets, and saying if some set of these are firing together, that's giving us a higher sense of confidence of that we have an attack, and we're doing that around insider threat and exfiltration, external adversary, and that's really helpful as well to kind of, what we're doing with Vectra and with all of our security tools. I want to emphasize it's not easy. It takes work, and we definitely have had to tune it, and we'll have to continue to do that as we go forward to make sure that it's going to work.
Yep, I completely agree. One of the questions that I often get when I talk to other customers is, if you're making technology choices or platform choices, do you go with EDR first? Do you go with NDR first? And I know, Jean-Yves, I'll turn this one to you. I know you have a perspective on this, so maybe you want to share with the audience what your thoughts are on that question.
So help me, Rich. If we have the option for one tool, which one?
Or which order? What would you pick first? Rather, even what would you go with first?
Yeah. I would say that we started with EDR, and I like EDR because I'm at the scene of the crime, right? If I can be right there on the computer and see everything that's happening, that's wonderful. But I can tell you in our red team testing, we've had the attacker kill EDR, and now we're blind. So for me, it isn't one or the other. I need both. I want to have as much visibility. I want to be able to do deep forensics with an EDR solution. I want to be able to do deep forensics with an NDR solution. I think you need both. I have a hard time picking one over the other. Okay. But if the adversary's on the endpoint, they can attack the EDR. If the adversary's on the endpoint, they can try to attack the NDR too, but I think that's harder.
Yeah. Okay. Jean-Yves, any comments on that, or should I go to the next set of questions here?
No, any other comments on that?
Okay. Very good. And then, I think before we get into like the rest of the Q&A, Shri, if you can go to the next slide, I think let's give you both a chance to make any top level closing comments, and then we'll just then formally just go straight into the rest of the Q&A as well. So maybe I'll start with you, Jean-Yves, and then turn it over to you, Rich.
No, in one word, our journey with Vectra is clearly the baseline of our second maturity step, and we look forward to pursuing this partnership. It's very valuable. That creates a lot of motivation within my team, and we know how agile the cyber guys are to jump from one company to another one. So thanks to the involvement of your tech team, Hitesh, my team members are very well motivated because they learn a lot. They feel to participate to a product development, which is not far to the right. So again, your partnership and your company's mindset, maybe that is a key word, is absolutely exemplary.
Thank you for that, Jean-Yves. Rich?
Sure. I might just kind of turn back to the attack and point out to everyone, one, we're still under attack, right? These adversaries haven't gone anywhere. And a big part of this, I know, isn't as maybe as interesting as the machine learning part, but the security awareness, getting your employees to know that they're the target, because not only are we being hacked at our systems, but this whole scenario really begins and develops very significantly and rapidly because of con artists and social techniques to social engineer people. And for me, we had a recent success story because of this, that we, our own security awareness program, we tell this story to our own employees, and someone was phished in this exact same way very recently, and they knew immediately that they were under attack. But that, that social media connection, that building of trust is incredibly powerful.
It is, and the point you make about employee awareness is a very important one as well. A lot of what happens, you can address in terms of preventing attacks from actually making their way through if you've got the right behavior on the part of employees or the people working for the company. That's absolutely true. And I think the other point you make is that we are always under attack is also a fundamental fact. And, the recent, SolarWinds event that has occurred that has created a significant issue across thousands of companies. If that isn't proof positive, I don't know what is. We're talking about Sanofi here specifically, but good heavens, I think SolarWinds has kind of opened up the floodgates here for the number of companies in the supply chain that have been exposed here. So, but in my closing comment here would be, to at least before we get into the Q&A, would be, look, for the audience at large, if there's one learning out of this, apart from the technology side of things, it's a partnership, and it's got to be one where it's not really a vendor customer. Ultimately, that's the transactional relationship. But what is really critical here is that the mindset, as Jean-Yves talks about, is what we take at Vectra great pride in, which is we literally obsess over our customer success, and then we make it a point because of that to really embed ourselves into the customer's organization and really be effectively Rich's extension. I mean, that's the essence of really driving success here, beyond the technology itself doing what it's meant to do. So, if I can, I think I'll at this point, let me cut over to some very specific questions here, the Rich, that are coming in. And one of the things here was around, did you use any SSL decryption tools in place at all? Or is there a role here that those tools play for you?
Yeah, I did mention that we have TLS intercept in our proxy. We are definitely looking at everything that comes in. But as we pointed out at the time of the attack, the WhatsApp web application was doing end-to-end encryption, and we allowed it. We had an exception in our proxy to allow WhatsApp communication, and that allowed a bypass of that control.
Okay. One of the other questions that came in is, we have not made any mention of traditional IDP IPS tools. Do you have any thoughts on that? I certainly do, but I'll turn to either you or to Jean-Yves for comment on that.
No, Rich is okay. You can answer Rich because we have.
Okay. Sure. So, traditional IPS is absolutely essential. I feel like it's it's kind of the bottom line. You have to have antivirus. You have to have traditional IPS. You have to look at your logs. You have to do all of that. You need good correlation rules. You need your SIM doing all of those things. But, again, once that attacker has become credentialed, I don't think you're going to detect it with any kind of intrusion prevention system. They're just going to log on. They're just going to move from machine to machine, and they're not doing anything. They're not breaking anything. They're not doing anything that's going to show up in a string match in a packet. And traditional IPS is typically looking at what it can see in a packet and seeing whether or not that's a known attack against a vulnerability. We absolutely see that. We absolutely get great value out of it. We have a host-based intrusion prevention system that's fantastic. We have a network-based intrusion, several of them that are very good. But an advanced adversary is going to credential up as fast as they can and go silent. And I don't think that network IPS is going to detect them at that point.
Yeah, and I would agree with you completely. I mean, I think the traditional signature-based approach works for a certain class of attacks, but what we just described here, your IDS IPS has no prayer of actually catching any of the stuff that we just discussed here. And the other thing, I think maybe just a wrap-up question for you, and Rich, I'll turn this to you, is maybe it's good for you to summarize in this attack that we just described, that you described, EDR and NDR, and what caught what, so that people can visualize like what here in your environment.
Yeah, sure. So on the EDR side, it was a single detection on the use of the WMI command. So, we're watching to see WMI, which is a standard Windows tool, being used for lateral movement. And we did see that. And so that was a great detection. And I can tell you, and we probably can share maybe via Vectra, that we have a lot of other EDR detections now that we've seen this. I don't want to share them on this call because they're very good and they're precious. They're very good detection strategies. On the network side, though, what the NDR did is it built the case. It saw, a laptop that it knows well, all of a sudden doing a port scan. And with a user logged onto it that doesn't normally do port scans, it then sees share enumeration based on that. And then it sees, unusual privilege privileges leveraged, and an account that it knows from a service account that should be used for something else, all of a sudden being used by this system on another machine. It's the relationships and the profiling over time. With the EDR, it's atomic. If it sees it, it fires. With the NDR, it had to build a case. It had to know the profiles and what's normal in your environment, what's inside and what's outside. But once it has that, it's hard to escape it because you have to behave, in the environment some way to move laterally. One of the things I didn't get to say early on was you also want to get the Vectra system as close to your servers as possible. It was easy for us when we first bought the product to put it right at our, north and south. We have packet brokers that made it easy to put it in front of our data centers. But you want it in your ESXi environment. You want the guest operating systems, when they communicate to another guest right next to it in the virtual environment, to be able to track that so you can see that lateral movement.
Yeah. And I would say that those principles apply equally well when you're dealing with any lift and shift into the cloud. And then certainly those lateral principles apply when you're looking at microservices in the cloud as well. So, look, we're at the top of the hour. So I will call it a wrap over here. Let me just first start by thanking Jean-Yves and Rich for what I thought was a really phenomenal conversation around Sanofi, specifically what you guys do around security, what you did to deal with this very specific attack. I'm hoping for the audience this was useful for you. And I want to thank everybody on the On24 team as well for pulling this together. With that, Jean-Yves and Rich, thank you again. Have a great rest of the day, evening, wherever you are. And with that, thank you and take care.
Thank you. We are going to provide an answer to remaining questions.
Yeah, maybe we'll do that. There's a bunch that came in. We can follow up separately. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.